Welcome to another episode of our podcast where we dive deep into the human condition and explore how we can create a more peaceful world. Today we are going to discuss a deeply complex issue, racism. More specifically, how racism from one group of people can often lead to reciprocal racism from another group living in close proximity. We'll explore why this cycle happens and, more importantly, how we can diffuse it to allow everyone to coexist peacefully. So grab a cup of tea, get comfortable, and let's get into it. Racism is an ancient problem. It has existed in various forms across different cultures, countries, and historical periods. Often when one group expresses prejudice or discrimination behavior toward another, it creates an atmosphere of resentment, anger, and fear. And that negative energy rarely stays contained. Like a spark in a dry forest, it spreads, sometimes igniting mutual hatred and perpetuating a cycle of racism that becomes increasingly difficult to break. Let's take a moment to break this down and understand why this cycle exists. At the core of racism is fear. Fear of the other. When one group perceives another as different, whether due to skin color, culture, religion, or language, they may begin to develop biases. These biases might manifest as stereotypes, discrimination, or even hostility. Now, when the group on the receiving end of such racism experience prejudice, it's a natural human response to want to protect oneself. Anger builds, suspicion grows, and soon the group that was initially the victim of racism may start developing their own prejudices against the opposers. And just like that, you have the making of a vicious cycle. But let's go deeper. Why does this happen? Why do humans have this instinct to respond to prejudice with more prejudice? The answer lies in the way our minds are wired. Humans are tribal by nature. For much of our evolutionary history, we lived in small, tight-knit communities where anyone outside of our tribe was seen as a potential threat. This ancient mentality still lingers in our brains today, even though our societies have become far more diverse and interconnected. When one group targets another with racism, it taps into this primitive us versus them mentality. The group being targeted may then feel compelled to create a protective boundary, reinforcing their own identity against what they perceive as a hostile other. It's a defense mechanism. However, this very defense mechanism perpetuates a cycle of racism because it relies on the same exclusionary thinking that fueled the initial prejudice. So how do we diffuse this? How do we break the cycle and create an environment where everyone can coexist peacefully? The first step is education. Not just learning about other cultures and histories, but understanding the psychological mechanism behind racism. When we recognize that much of our fear of the other is rooted in primitive instincts rather than rational judgment, we begin to gain control over it. We need to teach ourselves and our communities to identify when they instinctively biases arise and to question them. It's about rewiring our thinking. Secondly, it's crucial to create space for honest, empathetic dialogue. When people of different backgrounds share their experiences, pain, and hopes, it becomes much harder to maintain the barriers of us versus them. This doesn't mean forcing people to agree on everything that's neither realistic or necessary. It's about allowing individuals to express their narratives, to be heard and validated. It's through this process that empathy begins to bridge the gap created by prejudice. A third way to diffuse racism is to work on shared goals. When groups collaborate on common projects, especially those that benefit their communities, they shift their focus from their differences to their similarities. Whether it's building a community garden, organizing a culture festival, or starting a local business, Shared goals foster a sense of unity. People start to see each other not as members of different races, but as members of the same community. It's also essential to address the economic and political roots of racism. Often, racial tensions are exacerbated by economic inequality and political manipulation. When resources are scarce or opportunities seem limited, it becomes easy to scapegoat other groups. It's crucial to push for policies that promote economic equity, fair access to education, and equal opportunities. A society where people feel secure in their livelihood is less to fall prey to divisiveness of racism. And let's not forget the power of positive representation. The stories we consume in movies, books, news, and social media shape our perceptions of each other. By promoting narratives that highlight the richness and diversity of human experiences, we help dismantle stereotyping. We begin to see people as complex, multifaceted individuals rather than mere representative of a race. So what can we as individuals do to combat this cycle of material racism in our daily lives? Reflect on our own biases. Recognizing our own prejudices is the first step toward change. Ask yourself, when do you feel fear or mistrust toward certain groups and why? Engage in conversation with those different from you. It may be uncomfortable at first, but building relationship across racial lines is one of the most powerful ways to diffuse racism. Stand up against discrimination. When you witness racism, whether it's a casual comment or an act of exclusion, challenge it. You don't need to be confrontational. Sometimes asking a simple question like, "What do you mean by that?" can promote reflection. Support initiatives that promote equity and justice, whether it's through voting, volunteering, or educating others. Take an active role in shaping a fairer society. By understanding how racism from one group can trigger reciprocal racism in another, we start to see the cycle for what it is, a chain reaction of fear and misunderstanding. Diffusing it requires patience, empathy, and action. It's about learning to live and let others live, to embrace our differences while working toward common goals. So the next time you feel that spark of mistrust or see it in others, remember, racism is not an unsolvable problem. It's a pattern of thought, a cycle of behavior that we have the power to break. Let's strive to create communities where coexistence is not just a possibility, but a reality. Thank you for joining me today. I hope this discussion has given you some food for thought on how we can work together to diffuse racism and create a more inclusive world. Until next time, take care and let's keep the conversation going.